I'm a naturalized U.S. citizen, a Latina who speaks perfect English and has a doctorate. I'm scared to speak Spanish to my family in public because it will attract attention. I pay taxes, I volunteer, I follow the law, but my very Hispanic look and last name, I'm afraid, overshadows all these things. I am scared.
You're listening to the Found in Translation Talk Show on WPPMLP 106.5 in Philadelphia and anywhere you can download a podcast. Found in Translation stacks truth about politics and today's news headlines from a diverse perspective. This is Joel Berrocal. Let's welcome my co-host, speaker, author, entrepreneur, and apparently someone with a doctorate, Dionely Reyes. Buenas noches, mija.
I don't have
no, es culpa doctora.
Doctora, and you know what?
Reyes.
My initials are DR. My initials are
Dominicana,
DR. Dominican Republic.
It flows, mama. Dionely, how are you today?
I'm doing fabulous.
You were like in you do your program, La Chelcha, wonderful show.
La Chelcha, radio, TV show.
You know, but you're like in like a Friday mode already, even though it's Thursday.
Ay, Dios mío, but it's been a long week. It's been a very busy week, so it feels like a Friday already.
You're right about that. Let people know where they can subscribe to the podcast, my friend.
So you could go on Reyes Latino Talk podcast, and it's on iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, or anywhere you can download a podcast. So remember, Reyes Latino Talk podcast.
We're teasing Dionely because the opening quote that she just read was actually not Dionely, even though she's, a very credentialed woman in her own right. It actually was from a Twitter thread of responses that Latino journalists, political journalists, people know, Adrian Carrasquillo. Follow him at Carrasquillo on Twitter. Boricua guy, with our guest, would appreciate that. His followers have been DMing him since the El Paso tragedy, discussing their fears as Latinos, as Latinas, Latinx, the immigrant community, people of color during these times, which we will discuss in a moment. This episode is dedicated to the victims and their families of the mass shootings. Unfortunately, these are always like longer lists every week in El Paso, Texas, Dayton, Ohio. The children who have been separated by their parents through the ICE raids in Mississippi, and the legendary author, Toni Morrison. We will honor Morrison as well as share the latest on Puerto Rico with our special guest and stack some 20s later on in the show.
And Ray, we are honored to have another special guest with us tonight. The Southeastern Pennsylvania Chair of the National Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce, Joel Berrocal. Bienvenido, Joel.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Man. I'm excited. If the first 15 minutes that I've been here is any indication, we're going to have a good time today.
we bring the flavor. We bring a lot of heat, brother, a lot of passion, but also a lot of information for our community. Again, we really appreciate not only the people watching this on, listening to this as a podcast or on the radio program, WPPM, but also our digital watchers. We got people watching on IG. I see all kind of friends watching on IG. Really appreciate you guys. I think my buddy Brian Arnold from high school is watching. Some other friends, Teo Roxon, and Facebook Live. I know we got a lot of friends, particularly from your family. Joel, please share it with your folks. So, and I know people also watch it on Dionely's platforms. But Joel, I wanted to bring you on the show, Joel, and of course Dionely, one of our great co-hosts, as always, is welcome because. There's a lot to discuss today, as seemingly there's always too many things to discuss. We don't, unlike others, Latinos aren't getting a break in the summer. We don't get a chance to just kind of lay down for a second. But I think what's really important, whether it's Puerto Rico, the tragedies happening through this immigration, this attack on our community, literally, is that we wanted people to see the intersections of those things. And not only just the issues, but some of the solutions. And you've been a great leader locally and really throughout the diaspora on getting Puerto Ricans, we're organizing politically, but how do we organize economically? So I think, Joel, I think that's a really powerful initiative that you've taken. Why don't you really briefly start with what the National Puerto Rican Chamber is about, then we'll get into the rest of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So the National Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce, I'll give you the spiel. We're basically a 501c nonprofit. We were put together based out of Washington in 2010. So basically what our goal is we support the development of entrepreneurship, innovation, and business throughout Puerto Rico and the U.S. mainland through many, many different ways. Basically, we'd like to be an all-encompassing service for people who are trying to start business on the island, start businesses on the mainland, bring business from the island to the mainland. So we got a lot of things going on. I look forward to getting into all that.
That's excellent. And I think that when I was a small child, I'm talking about way back in the 70s and 80s, Puerto Ricans had that spirit. I think about Dionely, your community, the Dominican community, very entrepreneurial. I remember when the bodegas, when I was a kid, were owned by Puerto Ricans. There was even some Cubans back in the days around. And then we had a gulf, Joel, because I couldn't even find Puerto Rican restaurants sometimes in a lot of our communities. And I think the Dominican community sort of helped us recharge our entrepreneurial spirit. And of course, there's a big Dominican population on the island as well. So
Yes,
a lot of our
definitely.
celebrities are Dominicans too. Osuna's half Dominican, right? Nicky Jam.
Nicky Jam. Everybody's half Dominican now.
Casi-
They gotta
casi
tiene un
medio,
tío,
sí.
alguien.
There's a lot of them, and it's a big part. We have a great melding of our community. So I know that sentiment means relates to you, Dionely, and the work that you do in your leadership as a businesswoman as well. But we got a lot to talk about.
So, Ray, let's start with how we address this attack on our communities. Between the terrorist attacks in El Paso and throughout the country, the latest ICE raids in Mississippi, Latinos all over America are feeling under attack. How do we begin to address this?
I think I have three things I want to hear y'all thoughts about this. And then there's one thing at the end of the segment, what I don't want us doing, which I think is very important, is the first thing is that I think we have to be very clear what it is. And, it's sad. I don't say this because out of being egotistical, but Dionely, you've been part of this journey, and I think about all the great co-hosts and collaborators we have, whether it's Yashira, Elber Garcia, all of our friends around the country that are part of this show, Margot Borjas, who we just did the show with in San Diego, all these minds, we've been saying this from the beginning. Ever since the president came down that escalator and built his political case around the problem in the fundamental issue in this country being Latinos, specifically Mexican immigrants, we said this platform isn't about economic anxiety. It's not about these, ideological differences. It's about building this case to enough, not all white people, not because it's not all, and there's certainly some Latinos that are buying this Kool-Aid too, is that, that the problem in your life isn't the wealth gap. It's not your own insecurities. It's somebody else. So, and specifically Latinos and Latino immigrants. And we always knew immigrants was really a euphemism for Latinos. Doesn't matter. We saw it with the Puerto Rico stuff. So in El Paso, as American citizens, there was all kind of stories around these military veterans. There was all kind of people, quintessential Americans that were murdered the other day. So we've been saying that, and now the mainstream media has finally gotten around to it. So I just think we have to be clear what this is about. Next year isn't about, and we'll get into it with the presidential election stuff that we love to talk about. But the reality is the Democrats are going to win next year because of how great their health plan is, or how left their health plan is, or how moderate their health plan is. It's about crystallizing and letting people know what this is really about. And it's about this creating this racial division so that the 1% can maintain their power in this country, because that's really what their agenda is. The other thing I wanted to share is that, and I'm stealing this from you, Dionely, because you summed this up so well the other day. We were talking about Puerto Rico and why we were so successful
And so
as a
quickly.
diaspora and so quickly. And Dionely hit it on the head. Is that the Puerto Rican community unified and identified one direct goal. Rican renuncia. Renuncia, ¿verdad?
Hashtag.
So I think our challenge, and I don't have a great answer for this at this moment, maybe we'll get it in this conversation, is that I think we have to identify what is our goal or goals now moving forward around protecting ourselves and moving this conversation forward. And the last thing is, this is not about politics. This is about, there's a big, strong spiritual element to this. But at the end of the day, this is about self-preservation. And so I'm not saying that because I want to be exclusive or attack someone. I think, frankly, Latinos have been awfully peaceful, considering we're literally being gunned down here. But I think we have to understand that this is because for every one of us that's getting physically hurt, there's hundreds getting intimidated. There's millions that are losing sleep or losing, in the case of our young people, some part of their youth because of the stress, because of separation, because of the bullying that's happening. That's probably been underreported. So there's a lot to this. Dionely, I know this has been a tough week, and some people have tried to just avoid the headlines because those children in Mississippi, the families in El Paso, it's just tragic. So what's been on your mind this week as these tragedies have unfolded?
I just feel like we have to focus on a solution and supporting each other, and not about attacking the people that are causing it. Like, we have to focus on a solution. We have to come together. We need to stop thinking like, oh, that's their issue, that's their problem, they got to find a solution. It's like, no, these are all people that are being oppressed. We as Latinos are oppressed. If not in that way, like, oh, I'm okay, I have my citizenship. No, it's still us. It's still our issue.
El Paso, he wasn't asking for identification.
He wasn't asking for, prove to me you have a green card, prove to me you have citizenship. It's racism is all it is.
That's
it's
right.
racism.
Joel, I know, first of all, as a father, I mean, these issues, thinking about the people we dedicated last week's show to, which was the victims in Gilroy, California, which for people that aren't familiar with California, as East Coast folks, that's a traditional, historical Latino community. I mean, there's all who's picking garlic in California, right? It was at the Garlic Festival, and the youngest child, casi igual to my youngest. So, that hit me like especially painful. But just on a personal level and also as an activist, how you been feeling, man? It's been a tough week.
It's tough. It's tough to see. You walk around, I personally can't, I'll be honest, I can't relate because you see me, right off the bat, I don't look like, I look like a Latino, so I haven't seen that what other people might go through like yourself. But when you see, it's like she said that we're all in this together, in the minds of Trump y todo eso, los gringos, we're all the same. Boricua, Dominicano, It doesn't matter, So it's something we have to, like you said, find a solution, come together. We're all Latinos in this.
I remember someone telling me, you have the complexion for the connection, because I am pasty. I am so white. And I'm like, I know what you're trying to say, but believe me, racist people know that I'm not, that I don't fit in. They know I'm Latina. They could tell I'm an immigrant. And when I speak, you could tell I'm an immigrant. I'm proud of being an immigrant. And I hated that I've said I'm an immigrant. And then people are like, oh, don't say that about yourself. And it's like, that's not an insult. I'm an immigrant. I'm proud of it.
But sometimes our skin color, they'll say to you, tú eres blanquito, like as a term of endearment or something almost.
Yep.
I don't look at it that way, you know? But yeah, they it's a good thing to be that way, but
And that's another way to separate us, because we have to remember that's something.
Oh, we're gonna get talking about you. He's talking about those other people.
That's something, because I'm gonna get into that later on about gaslighters. That's one of the techniques gaslighters do, is divide and conquer. Like, oh no, this isn't about you. You're not Mexican. You're Dominican. Oh wait, and then if something happens to Dominican, oh no, but that's dark skinned Dominicans. That's not you. You're light skinned. Oh no, that's for Dominicans in the ghetto. You don't live in the ghetto. It's like, no, it's our issue. That's right. Eso afecta todo. We're all affected.
Well, think about, first of all, fundamentally, racism is a ridiculous thing, right? So it really is thinking about how we need to start thinking more about drug abuse and alcohol abuse, and we're starting to, right? Is that it's an illness. And so Ignorance. It doesn't make any sense. None of it makes sense, because the reality is that you've seen people, I know y'all watch these cable shows and stuff. You've seen white people who are farmers who are the biggest Trump supporters, who are now getting screwed the most with his ridiculous policies that are really about supporting Russia more than us. These trade wars, which is, you can't find even the most conservative economist that would agree that that's the right thing to do. And they'll go on TV and say, well, I'd rather suffer with my business because we got to keep the Mexicans out.
Oh, yeah.
So if and of course we know Latinos that support this guy. So if we have to, one thing I think we have to understand that that's where this is coming from, and understand that it does it to not go down those rabbit holes. But the one thing I would say on that too is that the one thing we don't need to do, because I think it's a waste of time and I think it's going to cause us more stress, is I don't think we have to try to prove our Americanness to any of these people. And Joel knows this as well as I do. Puerto Ricans have been American citizens for 102 years. And we don't have to, and I don't care if you've been here 80 or 3. We have just as much a right to the American dream as anybody else. And I think about, and I go back, and I don't just say this because Dionely's sitting here, but how much I admire the American spirit of the Dominican-American community. You talk about hustlers. You talk about people that want it and are just here to live the life. So I think, Dionely, that do you think that what do you think about that? Because I just see a lot of that, trying to prove something, because when you're sick like that, we can sit here and talk about our accomplishments and our Americans all they want. They're not going to accept us because they're not accepting themselves.
I think a lot of people, they align themselves with Trump because they feel like, okay, if I'm on the side of the oppressor, then it doesn't affect me.
Amen.
Then I'm not a victim. And it's like, no, you still are. You're in denial about it, but it still affects you.
That's right.
So you got to open your eyes. Abre tus ojos.
That's right.
You wake up. It does affect you.
Now, look, leadership is scary. And leadership, when you stick your neck out It gets whacked sometimes. So we say that understanding that to then accept this stress and accept this reality is a hard pill to swallow. Because look, we enjoy this stuff. Joel loves to. We've been homies about a year, and we love to connect with political stuff. Dionely, you're very aware of things. Some people are into this, and some people just want to live their lives. And you know what? They have every right to do that. They don't know everybody's supposed to be a political animal like we are. So I understand that sentiment, like wanting to steer clear of it. But the reality is, sometimes there's times in the I don't know. I know there's phrases that articulate this better. That sometimes we just gotta step it up and say, look, for the next year and a half, we know what that calendar is like. I need to get involved in this in a way that I didn't expect to. And Joel, I want to turn to you because we saw this in the Puerto Rican community. Post Maria, I've never seen Puerto Ricans organized like that, other than the Trinidad de la Hoya fight back in the day.
Ay, Dios mío, I remember.
Yeah, you know, I like to run my sports analogy sometimes. We learned lessons there. People stepped it up. They came out of the woodwork. They opened their eyes. They worked together. They got past these divisions because these political parties in Puerto Rico have been some of the biggest divisions in our community, regardless how you feel about it. So what's a lesson that you learned from that experience that you continue to learn with your work in the Puerto Rican community?
Yeah, after Maria, when we were doing all our hurricane relief and all that work, the community of the Diáspora was galvanized like I'd never seen it before. Independentitas, PNP, Populares, whoever on the
Agnostics,
island.
which is a lot of us here.
Whatever it was. We came together for one cause, kind of what we were talking about earlier.
That's right.
And that, to me, I think I would like to look at that as a blueprint to our continued economic recovery. You know what I mean? Like,
that's right.
The same model, because the Diáspora and the people on the island, we're all one. We're all Boricuas. It's not. I don't like to differentiate. So if we could come together the same way we did after Maria, for the betterment of PR's economy and stuff like that, we're going to go pretty far.
That's right. Before we go to the next segment, again, you're watching and listening to the Founding Translation Talk Show with Ray Collazo, my co-host Dionely Reyes, Doctora Reyes, who she is today, and the local chair of the National Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce, my homie Joel Berrocal. You know, every year, Dionely, as I get older, I collect these young boys in my life. I pick up a new young boy friend, keep me young, vigorous.
The young vibes.
And, we smoke cigars. I feel like a young guy once in a while. So Joel's my young boy of 2019, and he's a great friend, great family for people that know his family up in the Bristol area. But the last thing I'll say is that I want people to think, and I mean, it makes me really emotional thinking about it, but I want people to think about those children, in this case in Mississippi. First of all, you literally can't pay people to move to Mississippi. It's by far the poorest state in the union. It loses population if immigrants didn't move there.
Worse than education,
It's the worst in education. It's the poorest people. The same poor white folks vote for Republicans every time, who don't do anything for them economically, who don't do anything to improve their education system, but they sell racism to it, and they sell, we're pro-life and we're Christians, so they keep voting for these same people year after year, don't do anything for them. Forget race. Don't do anything for these poor white people. It's the poorest white people in the country. Those Latinos should have rolled out the red carpet for them. You're going to work for us. We don't have to pay you that much, and you're going to buy homes. You're going to make businesses. You're going to pay taxes. It should be the opposite. So all these people wanted to do is live their lives. Regardless how you feel the immigration issue, is the best way to handle it on the first day of school to deport 600-something parents? And so now who's going to take care of these kids? Because most of the kids are U.S. citizens. So even if you have no heart at all, it's not the right way to handle it. And beyond that, how freaking immoral and cruel to do those children.
On the first day of school.
On the first day of school.
They want to just... they want us all to be afraid, the people watching. All of us other Latinos, like, oh my God, look how much power they have. They're heartless.
They were sending a message.
They were sending a message. That's what they were doing.
That's right.
So that's why we got to come together more. We have to empower each other. Let's stop thinking, oh, wait, those are Mexicans. Those are Nicaragua. I'm different. No,
I've been here 17 years. Come on.
Let our nationality or background identify us, but not divide us.
That's right. Dionely, when we come back from break, we're going to have one of our favorite segments of the show, Gaslighting O Que, and we're going to do it in a way that's going to honor one of America's great authors who we lost earlier this week. Dionely, take us out.
Okay, when we come back from break, we're going to honor legacy of Toni Morrison during my Gaslighting O Que segment.
Whenever you want.
You're listening to the Found in Translation Talk Show on WPPM LP 106.5 FM in Philadelphia. Listen to 106.5 FM in Philly at thephillycam.org/listen and on the TuneIn app. And you can download podcast on Reyes Latino Talk podcast feed on iTunes and anywhere you can download a podcast. So in my segment, Gaslighting O Que, of course, I always start with the definition of gaslighting. So gaslighting in Spanish is called luz de gas. Gaslighting is an insidious form of persistent manipulation and brainwashing that causes the victim to doubt her or himself and ultimately lose her or his own sense of perception, identity, and self-worth. So gaslighting can occur in personal relationships, at the workplace, or even an entire society. So one of the ways that gaslighting works is like psychological warfare. The falsehoods are repeated constantly in order to stay on the offensive, control the conversation, and dominate the relationship. So we see this again in personal relationships, and we see this over society. I'm sure that you guys see on the news like just blatant lies being told to us over and over and over. We're expecting to believe it, but we have to like stay aware. So we also got to remember that the gaslighter's goal is to dominate and control. So at its extreme, the ultimate objective of a pathological gaslighter is to control, dominate, and take advantage of another.
So in this segment, we're going to kind of flip the script in a way because we want to talk about gaslighters, the concept of gaslighting, even how it affects some of the most venerated people in our society. So one of the things we wanted to do in this show was honor the legacy of, one of the all-time legends, American authors that had a particular impact on how the African American community is viewed in this country, frankly. And so we're really honored to honor the legacy of the great author, Toni Morrison, here on the Found in Translation. First of all, I just want to read, I wanted to sum up in a way. I feel I've read Beloved and a few of our other books, but, I got to turn to some of my great African American colleagues, especially these black women that we know that are just so strong and they really can sum it up. So I went on Facebook and I said, I bet you my dear friend Tracy Sturdivant, who's on vacation right now, her family, I bet you she has something to say about the legacy of Toni Morrison, and she summed it up so well. So let me read this Tracy's note, and I want to thank Tracy for allowing me to read this for us. Toni Morrison, I remember stumbling across The Bluest Eye, one of her great books, during one of my many neighborhood library trips when I was a kid. Those visits were a fixture in my coming-of-age story. Never could I have imagined what I was in store for as I flipped through those pages. A depiction of black girlhood in a way that I had never seen in the books that I had previously encountered at such a young age. Her storytelling was exhilarating. I recall devouring all of her books. So rich, and it helped me grasp my potential brilliance, because we're brilliant. The woman was regal and a symbol of the importance and the impact made by black women have on the platforms to tell all of our stories out loud, unapologetically. Mm-hmm. Rest well, beloved. Thank you, Tracy Sturdivant. And in honor of that, we're going to flip the script because you've identified a clip, Dionely, where even someone like Toni Morrison confronts at a moment where she's being honored at the height of her career with this concept of gaslighting and how she responded to it. Mm-hmm. All right, exactly. So we're going to play some of the clip, and then we'll get Dionely's analysis. So this is Toni Morrison, I think in the late 90s, again, at the peak of her career, her notoriety, but right around the time The Beloved was converted into a film, a feature film. And she's on the Charlie Rose show. Charlie Rose is kind of perceived as an old sucio now, but at the time was perceived the intellectual interviewer, and actually at the time was I was a great admirer of as a wannabe broadcaster.
The white gaze. And I've spent my entire writing life trying to make sure that the white gaze was not the dominant one in any of my books. And the people who helped me most arrive at that kind of language were African writers. Chinua Achebe, Bessie Head. Those writers who could assume the centrality of their race because they were Africans. And they didn't explain anything to white people. Those questions were incomprehensible to them. Those questions that I would have as a minority living in an all-white country.
So to give a little context to that, is that she's asked on the show, basically, in so many words, how come you don't write more about white people? And on some level, wouldn't that show that you're even a greater writer? And so you can imagine the reaction, one of America's greatest authors being asked about, Nip saying that, to be the best, you have to write about white people.
You got to fit in with the elite and stop telling the story from that point of view.
How did that resonate with you, Dionely? What do you want our folks to share about that moment from Toni Morrison?
So this is something that we have to keep in mind. Like growing up in our history books, it was always, these people are the best. These people are great. Like the oppressors are amazing. Look all the great things they did. But then they never talk about the flip side, the harm they caused and how they were putting us down and basically our community self-esteem. And they don't talk about the heroes and the Latino heroes, the black heroes or anything like that. And they didn't really talk about, they didn't tell history from our point of view. So here comes this amazing author, novelist. She actually won the Pulitzer Prize in 1988 and the American Book Award for Beloved which was a book that she published in 1987. Could I go a little bit about what the book is about?
Absolutely.
Beloved.
Absolutely.
So there was this lady, her name was Margaret Garner. She was an enslaved African-American woman in pre-Civil War America who was celebrated, and she was notorious for killing her own daughter rather than allowing the child to be returned to slavery. So her story was the inspiration for the novel Beloved in 1987, and which was adapted into a film of the same name starring Oprah Winfrey in 1998. So people, you have to understand the importance of being able to tell your story, talk about your history. I'm sure that Latinos are listening to this, black people are listening to this. So it's extremely important. Don't leave it up to our education system or the teachers or, don't think that they're going to teach your kids about your history. Sit down with them, explain to them. It's very important to be able to understand where you came from and what you've been through and how much you've overcome. Because something gaslighters do is they try to control the narrative. They have this false narrative and they want to keep it going. So anytime that somebody speaks out and is this is actually what really happened, then it's okay, enough about that. How about you talk about this instead?
Representation is so important. And, I think I've said it on the show, but I don't know if I really kind of articulated it as well as I want to right now. But part of a big reason why I do the show, and I started the show 6+ years ago in my basement, and I just did it in my basement until about 8 months ago. But that was that, especially as a Puerto Rican, and Joel, I know you can relate to this. We got a lot of icons, but it's very much we get a lot of credit for our artistic and our athletic prowess, right? The boxers, the reggaetoneros, the divas, the baseball players, and I love all that stuff, and I enjoy it like everybody else. But I was you know what? And, I know all these other people, not just Puerto Ricans, Latinos, there's other people that I know. Yeah, they might be able to dance, they maybe dance bachata really well on the weekend, but they smart too. And we got an intellectual element to us that I wanted to share.
Exactly.
And the biggest feedback I get from people, particularly Latinos, about the show, besides my incredible charisma, of course, is the biggest thing is it's not the political analysis. It's yo, Ray, where all these smart ass Latinos that not only just smart, but that are relatable. Because it's not about I wanted the message of this whole endeavor, frankly, to be, is that you could be professional, got your stuff together, successful, make money and, take care of your fam and not be like a snob. Mm-hmm. And I think if I crystallize this whole thing to that, is that you could be who you are. And so it goes back to what you were saying earlier, is that people feel like, even on this extreme example, we're living in gunned down the streets, like people felt a lot of times that Latinos, you have to like change who you are to be successful.
No.
In business or in whatever you're doing. And Toni Morrison, even at the height of her success, is still being questioned. So the struggle's real. Let's listen to the rest of the clip real quick.
Like the United States. But when I read the poetry of Cesar, or the poetry of Senghor, or the novels particularly, Things Fall Apart was more important to me than anything. Only because there was a language, there was a posture, there were the parameters. I could step in now, and I didn't have to be consumed by or be concerned by the white gaze. That was
Toni Morrison, this woman got her master's from Princeton in 1955.
Wow.
And she still got that inspiration from, in this case, African authors who gave her a vision of what she could do. Joel, jump in this conversation, brother.
Yeah, so I don't like that idea. Like you had said that the Boricuas, especially, I could relate with that, is that all we're known for is the athletes, the singers like that. In my work and meeting these business owners throughout the island, I'm meeting a generation of young people, young 30-somethings my age, college educated, bilingual, creating new markets, reinventing old ones. These aren't athletes. The athletes, the singers, the Mark Anthony, they're not the ones who are going to rebuild Puerto Rico and the economy. It's going to be the people like me, the youthful people who are on the ground, got the boots on the ground and are really doing the work. So you're really starting to see like that whole generation just take it to the next, take the reins. Kind of, like I said, they kind of got tired of waiting for the opportunity, so they went out and created it.
Exactly.
Dionely, any other thoughts about gaslighting? Anything else you wanted to share about the legacy of Toni Morrison that you learned from that clip?
Well, I want to just wrap up with a quote. A quote by Toni Morrison. To be given dominion over another is a hard thing. To wrest dominion over another is a wrong thing. To give dominion of yourself to another is an evil thing. So remember, everyone, you got to stay empowered, empower yourself, and remember that in empowering yourself, you are inspiring others.
It's fantastic, Dionely. And we come back, stacking 20s. We're going to hear about how I was balling out in San Diego this week.
Yes, Bernie Sanders, mi amor.
We'll come back, and Dionely will grill me when we come back and Found in Translation. Get to it, brother. You're listening to PPMLP Philadelphia 106.5 hashtag people got to hear this, people powered media. Thank you so much for joining us, and again, support the people powered media movement here at Philly Camdo PPMLP. I know, Joel, you're very impressed by the whole setup here. We got radio station. This is the home for public access television in Philadelphia downstairs, so much respect to Vanessa Ramirez Graver, the executive producer of Found in Translation, the director of the radio department, a tremendous activist herself, y Boricua. So another Puerto Rican we got to get in your chamber. And again, we're enjoying our conversation here with, of course, Dionely Reyes, La Doctora. And I love this new nickname. It's going to stick, DR. And a great new friend to the program, the local leader for the National Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce, Joel Berrocal. And we're going to hear more about his work in a second.
Yes, well, we need to talk about this because Ray had a special backstage VIP pass to this past Monday.
Better you Puerto Rican, baby.
UnidosUS presidential forum featuring 5 of the presidential candidates. And Ray had a chance to meet and greet Senator Bernie Sanders. Dime qué pasó.
A lot of people, I'll put it out there. I didn't want to show off, so I didn't start blasting the picture out. Friends got it, Joel. I rubbed it in with the crew here,
Claro.
And some other relatives. But basically, so people know my day job, I work with UnidosUS, used to be National Council of La Raza, big Latino civil rights organization. So we had our national our conference in San Diego, and we had a presidential forum. Okay. So I was tapped, the national political director. So I was tapped each candidate had a staff liaison. So I was tapped to be Bernie's, liaison. So what was interesting about it was Bernie's Bernie. Bernie's an old gruff guy, and he's kind of like grumpy in like a nice grandpa way. But and there's a whole other interesting little tidbits I can share, and maybe we'll do it on another show. But basically, I wanted to share with people that of the 5 candidates, we had Biden there, Sanders, Harris, Klobuchar, and Castro. And the whole thing with Castro was a little last second, which was interesting. He was actually supposed to be in Puerto Rico. But con todo lo revolú in Puerto Rico and what happened in El Paso, he ended up in Texas so he could fly over. But the long and short of it is that, so a lot of people are asking me, you can watch it online too, so people should have their own conclusions, that Bernie got the strongest reaction from the crowd when he came out. Of
Claro.
And
you know why?
Porque
Cardi B loves him.
Oh, see? It goes back to the Dominicanas.
It's not. Okay, Cardi B, she could be from wherever, but Cardi B is very influential, and she is half Dominican.
No doubt.
But she loves Bernie Sanders.
And that video just came out. And I'll remind people, half of not only the Latino community, but half of the Latino voters are millennial Latinos.
He's relatable.
So the young crowd is what vibes with him.
Claro.
And the other thing that Bernie got, it's the whole thing, but basically we were back and forth. We're backstage. So we're walking through the kitchen. We're walking through the side rooms. We're walking where the workers are. 80% of the workers are Latinos. So as they saw the candidates walking around, the one that they stopped with their glasses and their dinner plates and all that to stop and applaud was Bernie. And these are Latinos, English-speaking, immigrant, old, young, so very interesting. They all did well. They all got a good reaction.
Cardi B.
And I think Dionely, as always, has hit the nail on the head on his secret. I think he's the one that spoke the most about Puerto Rico, Joel.
Oh, see?
But they all did well. And I want to give Biden a shout-out, too, because he's the only one of the 5 that before he left, stopped to hang out with the workers in the back. So he went to one of like the lunch tables with the guys and women on break, and he sat with them 10 minutos, hablando. So I want to give Biden a lot of props, too. Biden had the biggest entourage, which you can imagine. But they all had their entourages. And there was a lot of interesting tidbits I can share. But I think people generally were really excited about it. And it was good that Castro got to come because as the Latino, I think it was good for him to, especially as a guy from Texas, to share his thoughts about what's going on in El Paso. So, Joel, as a business guy, as someone I know is very involved in Puerto Rican issues, what do you want to hear the candidates talking about? I know they haven't talked much about Puerto Rico during the debates. As we get into the debates and as the campaign unfolds, what do you want to hear them discussing?
I mean, I kind of always bring it back to PR. What you'll see is around this time when they're fighting for the nomination, they kind of come with the same cookie cutter message to Puerto Rico. We're going to fight for statehood. We're going to do It's kind of the same thing. It's almost cliche at this point. So I want to see which candidate. I'd really like to see which candidate will actually come out and give us a different message and not what they think the majority wants to hear. I don't know what that message would be, but I want to see something different. Somebody, to stand out of the pack. I'm sorry. But, all their messages, especially after everything with Jose Joe, was kind of similar, very cookie cutter. So, I'm looking forward to see which one will kind of stand out and get my attention that way. Now,
traditionally, presidential candidates, and even in this context, the Puerto Rican issue has always been really difficult because it's if you take an opinion, it becomes very divisive because until very recently, it really became there was one question to presidential candidates, which was the status question, right? So then now it's a little more nuanced. Obviously, there's the debt issue. Even before the hurricane, now there's the hurricane relief, which exacerbated the debt issue, and now the various issues related to what's going on the island now politically. So I think one of the things, I think you're right. I think that, first of all, we need to demand for them to give us a comprehensive approach to not only what's going to happen in the island, but the 20% of the population that migrated now to the States, and in fact, the larger diaspora, because you're really not talking about the 3 million now, you're talking about the 8 million, all of us.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're very involved in that.
And I look at, you kind of brought up a good point. I think right now with all the turmoil in the government, the debt, statehood, as important as an issue as it is, I don't know if it's the priority. I'd like to see a candidate talk about the fiscal control board, because that across party lines on the island, pretty much everybody's in agreement that they don't want them around.
Exactly.
PNP, Popular, Independentista, nobody wants them. So I'd like to see that candidate that comes out and talks about what they're going to do with the promesa.
So we're going to give like free political advice to all the candidates, because as I know Dionely knows, but I don't know if you know this, Joel, we have friends in many of these campaigns.
You have friends at high places.
Well, I mean, I'm hanging out with Bernie. You don't think I know some people that work with him?
Who else you took pictures with? I saw the one with Bernie.
I took a picture. I got a picture with Biden and Bernie talking to each other in the hallway. And then I tried to take a picture with Biden's people, but they were very no pictures. But I do have a picture with Booker from the past. And I have one with Julian's brother, the congressman, Joaquin. So those are the pictures I have. Okay. My buddy that was staffing, much respect to Carlos Quebrada, one of my great friends who works with me, he got a real nice picture with Kamala. Like, they look like a nice couple together. It was really, really nice. She had a real power business suit on. But I didn't get very close to her, just the way the thing was set up. But, Joel, I think in terms of the Puerto Rican piece, I suggest to all those campaigns who are watching this, and they're going to go back to their bosses tomorrow morning, is that you want to have a comprehensive approach. We have to talk about the debt. We have to talk about getting rid of the promesa. We've got to talk about the Jones Act. I need to see that in any plan.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of other measures. There's the EITC piece, the health care reimbursement. There's a lot of technical things that could help raising the minimum wage on the island, things like that. But I think the bottom line is, to your business point, Joel, is that there has to be an approach that empowers the island to act with more independence, regardless of eventually, because if it's going to become a state, you still got to treat us like we're legit anyway. So regardless of which direction that piece goes, we need to take more ownership of the island.
Absolutely.
Dionely, with the presidential campaigns, I know we've had a few debates now. You saw your paisana, Marlene Peralta, on my last debate post-game show. She did a fantastic job with her analysis. So what's your take on, now as we've had some time to check out the candidates, what's your thought about the presidential field at this point?
I think that being relatable, especially for the millennials, that's going to have a huge impact. And I think Bernie Sanders va adelante. Pero you know what I was thinking? Somebody should, even if they don't win, like, they could represent us Latinos and be like the unifying force for us. Like, we're saying we need to unite. We need like blacks and Latinos. We're the oppressed population in this country, to represent us. And then even if they don't win, they could still be like our leader.
Well, it's interesting.
And keeping us united.
Like Julian Castro, who was seen as a rising star in the party several years ago. I think a lot of people there's been articles about, wow, Julian is finally who we thought he could be. So even if he doesn't win, I think we could debate about who's the leader, but I think he needs to, because he could be the VP, or he could be a very strong force moving us forward. And he's in a unique position to do that, because how many of us got the mic right now? And I'll tell you, he may not be the most qualified or the best candidate, but he's hitting all the points, including Puerto Rico, where that was the first weekend of his campaign. When we come back, Dionely, we're going to get into a little bit we're going to take a deeper dive in Puerto Rico with our main man, Joel, okay? So you start and you go.
So soft. It's distracting. Está bien. You're listening to the Found in Translation talk show on WPPM LP 106.5 FM in Philadelphia. We are happy to have Joel Berrocal from the National Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce join us. Oh! Wepa! My son's half Puerto Rican, so I love this. Of course. So, Joel, we are going to update everyone on the Chamber's activities in a minute. But first, we need an update on what's happening in Puerto Rico. 3 governors in 6 days. And now many are saying hashtag Wanda renuncia.
Yeah, I mean, Netflix couldn't have wrote a better special
novela
than this. I know. So, yeah, Wanda was sworn in yesterday, but we're still up in the air, still a little uncertain if she's going to actually stay or even wants the position. She came out and made a public statement, but it didn't really leave any confidence. It didn't leave anybody with confidence. The rumors are going around that she wants to name the current resident commissioner, Jennifer Gonzalez, the Secretary of State, wait for her to get approved, and then resign and have Jennifer take over the term. That's what's going around, but in these past couple weeks, so many rumors are going around. It's hard to guess. Like, everybody's just kind of making stuff up as they go.
So, Joel,
go ahead.
I was going to say, if you had to choose between Puerto Rico remaining a commonwealth, becoming a state, or becoming independent, which do you think?
Bomb thrower. She gets right to it.
I'm about to make some enemies right here. Like, that's a touchy issue, but I'm not going to get. That's a whole other podcast. But I'm a pro independence. To keep it short and sweet. I've always been independentita. My family's from Lares, so that's something.
That's all you had to say.
Yeah. Cool. So like
you're amongst friends, Joel. We'll just leave it at that.
I probably made a bunch of enemies just now, but
Oh, by the way, for people watch Residente was just on Hot 97 last week.
He was, yeah,
and talked about that issue. So I would just encourage, look, for discussion. We're here to be intellectual, discuss. I would watch that, and he gives a very good perspective. And he actually talks about how he talks to people like Nicky Jam and Daddy Yankee about the issue. And he goes, well, no one's ever explained that perspective.
Absolutely.
And look, the bottom line is, regardless how it all shakes out, we need to have more control of this process. The people have to have more control.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So what do you say he was talking about becoming independent?
Well, he was saying, Residente is the most famous of the celebrity class of the independentistas. So
his music was like about that from the beginning.
A very political guy.
Yeah.
So what he was saying was that he was explaining to Daddy Yankee and Nicky Jam during all this crisis why he's pro-independence and how Puerto Rico could survive being pro-independent. And that what they were saying, they weren't saying they were necessarily agreeing. They said, you've opened my eyes to another way of thinking about it, because no one ever has explained it, because and he says on Hot 97, the pro-independence party, and it's like the far left here. It's like intellectual. It's hard to connect with people. They're people with PhDs, and they think about these things.
Doctora.
Like doctoras like yourself. Yeah. So Joel, we'll see what happens, right? Because
Absolutely.
Si queda Wanda, I think there'll be a great fervor to get her out. She was a real shady attorney general. There was an issue with
a cloud hanging over her.
Besides some of the corruption stuff, I don't know if you saw. There's the way she treated a Afro Puerto Rican teenage girl, and she was treated like an adult. And
she's got a lot of baggage.
She's got a lot of baggage. Her skin's a little too dark to be wearing that gold blonde hair she got. That's another thing.
Yeah.
But then Jago is a total mess. She's the most prominent Trump supporting Puerto Rican I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And so I think both of them will cause a lot of activity on the island. So
yeah, I mean, they all represent, and same with Rivera Schatz, who's the president of the Senate, who he was rumored to be somebody to take over as governor.
He's terrible, that guy.
But all three of them represent the old guard.
Yeah,
and those protesters, that's not what they're looking for.
In the era of corruption.
Yeah. And in my opinion, I like I said, we can go in for a while, but there in the party, in the PNP, there has to be somebody youthful who's not tied to that administration with fresh ideas who they could have did. Like,
keep an eye out for these two names. And I must admit, I'm embarrassed to admit, I didn't know they were an actual couple. But a woman who made a real strong run for the governorship the last time, Alejandra Lugaro.
Yeah,
Lugaro, and her husband is in the assembly, very sharp guy, Manuel Natal, who's been getting a lot of national attention. David Begnad's been interviewing him because he's a real sharp guy, Cornell. And
he's an up-and-comer for
Up-and-comer. He sort of they've created their own like independent party per se.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
We'll see, right? But Joel, talk about the National Puerto Rican Chamber and some of the work we're doing here locally. And I'm proud to say I'm collaborating with you. My brother Mike's collaborating with you to generate support for Puerto Rican entrepreneurship, not only to make money, but to support the island.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, I've made my role has basically just been I've been meeting and greeting on the island and throughout this area, just finding connections, looking for potential opportunities, and we've been, and like how I said earlier, it's been amazing the people I've been meeting, like just people who really go after and get, especially on the island, like young people, businesses, stuff like that. So primarily, I've been working with a lot of companies founded on the island, a lot of production, goods and services, stuff like that, and trying to bring their markets to bring their products to U.S. markets.
That's what's up.
So we have a few that we've been working at. A lot of those relationships are still kind of in their infancy. We're still trying to figure out the best way to proceed with that.
What's been cool is that by meeting you, it made me more aware of paying more attention to Puerto Ricans that are doing business stuff.
Yeah.
And there's more out there than people think.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And the thing is, I would challenge people to think about in their daily life, let's say you're in Philadelphia, wherever, is like, how can you support, what's the next opportunity you have to support a Puerto Rican business? You got, obviously the obvious things, right? You do insurance, that's your business, right?
Absolutely.
Insurance brokers, people that sell cars, people that sell all kind of products and services.
Mom and pop bodegas.
Mom and pop, but it's like making it just a little more of an effort to support. And that's one of the things I've always gone back, Dionely, to the Dominican community, that, Dominicans, help each other with, okay, we're going to maybe lend you a little money so you can get the tiny little bodega. And then
my dad used to lend out money.
Yeah.
And my mom had a bodega, and they both were able to retire before age 50.
Exactly. Wow, that's impressive. So
claro.
It's amazing.
And they couldn't even graduate high school because they had to work. They had to leave school and work. But it's like,
but it's about that support of each other. It's like, how do we look out to support? Okay, can you find a banquet hall that's owned by a Latino? Can you find a travel agent? People still use those. So
go that extra mile. Do that a little bit extra research and see where your dollars are going. Is my take on it. Like a lot of the companies we're working with are creating these markets. They're making it easier, basically. They're kind of consolidating all the different products from throughout the island and making it easier so people here in the diaspora can just go right online, just like same thing as ordering on Amazon or something like that.
Joel, if people want to follow up with you, let people know where they can find you on social media, and if they want to support some of these brands and some of these businesses that you're working with, brother.
Yeah, I'm on all social media. You can find me on Twitter at Joel Berrocal. Haven't been on there that long, so help me get some followers.
Está bien. We got a lot of friends, brother. Especially Dionely. She's the IG star around here.
And then on Instagram, we're at NPR Chamber. I don't have my own personal one, but that's the Chambers.
That's what's up, Joel. We're gonna keep talking. I'm gonna do an event. We gotta talk, brother, because I'm looking to do an event at the last. Before Labor Day, a back-to-school special at a Puerto Rican restaurant in Jersey.
That's it. Let's do it.
And I want to do something with the chamber. And, of course, Dionely, you're always invited. Thank you. Dionely, your last shout-outs and let people know where they can find you on social media, even though everybody knows Dionely, la doctora.
Oye, la doctora, Dios mío. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. This is Dionely Reyes. Remember, you can follow me on Facebook and on Instagram, Dionely etc. DIONELY ETC.
Thank you for joining the Final Translation. Have a wonderful weekend. Paz.